Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Welcome back, Rupanuga Prabhu, to your series. Thank you very much for making available to us something that many devotees may lack some clarity on. What will you be speaking on today, please?
Well, the GBC got together and had a meeting and decided that they have to go to Srila Prabhupada with some questions because they were saddled with the responsibility to carry on after his disappearance. So some things we wanted to make sure we had straight before. So we didn't like the idea of going in and saying, just in case we know we're leaving soon, so we didn't like to do that, but we were saddled with the responsibility of carrying on. So it was necessary. So we went in to see him. And what I have here is a recording of that part, starting with Satsvarupa Maharaj, who was asked by the rest of us to ask certain questions which he had written down, in which he reads off to Srila Prabhupada one by one, and he answers them. And this records these answers. Now, it starts off a little rough, but later on it gets clear, and most of it can be understood. And I have an exact transcription, which I've matched to it, and it's exact. I can also discuss from that and answer questions if there are questions. I'm sure there will be. So it begins with Satsvarupa telling Srila Prabhupada why we've come. That he says that I've been asked to read you like that. So if we're ready to begin, we do it.
And this is May 27th?
May 27, 1977.
Mm-hmm.
The last GBC meeting with Srila Prabhupada. He was very much indisposed, as you can tell from his voice. He's weak. And we didn't want to impose all 18 of us who were present, 19 of us. So we chose the charter members who were still there to go in on behalf of the rest of us.
Chartered members means those
the first GBC members that were still in the GBC,
like
which happened to include myself. So I was in the room, and we added Kirtananda to it. He wasn't GBC originally, but because he was there and he was senior man, we invited him.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yes.
All right. What you want to play the?
Please.
Okay. Here we go. Everybody has to put on their best submissive oral reception, and listen very carefully. We're already on. We're already on. Okay, here we go.
We were all asked by the rest of the GBC to come to ask some questions. These are the members of the original GBC that you first made it up. Our first question is about the GBC members. We want to know, how long should they remain in office?
They should remain for good. They should remain for good. Selected men are chosen, so they cannot be changed. Rather, if some competent man, no, he should be added. I shall recommend that Vasudeva to become one of the GBCs.
Vasudeva Deoji Punja. He's the founder of he's building the temple in Fiji.
How many GBCs are there?
23.
Adding, GBC is not to be changed.
But then, in the event that some present GBC member leaves, either leaves,
The another should be elected.
by the votes of the present people. Then our next question concerns initiations in the future, particularly at that time when you're no longer with us. We want to know how a first and second initiation would be conducted.
Yes, I shall recommend some of you. After this is settled up, I shall recommend some of you to act as officiating acharya.
Is that called Ritvik Acharya?
Ritvik, yeah.
Then what is the relationship of that person who gives the initiation and the
Guru. He's Guru.
but he does it on your behalf?
Yeah. That is formality. Because in my presence one should not become Guru. So on my behalf, on my order, Amar Ajnai Guru hoye. He is actually Guru, but by my order.
So they may also be considered your disciples.
Yes, they are disciples. I consider. Who?
No, he's asking that these Ritvik Acharyas, they're officiating, giving Diksha. They're the people who they give Diksha to. Whose disciple are they?
They're his disciple.
They're his disciple.
Who is initiated. His grand disciple.
Yes. Then we have a question
When I order him to become Guru, he becomes regular Guru. That's all. He becomes disciple of my disciple. That's it.
Next, we have a question about the BBT.
That question is about BBT, and we can discuss that another time, but should I comment on this?
Yes, please.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the transcript of what you just heard. And this transcript is an exact replication. I've matched them syllable by syllable. And so I'll begin. This is short. So Satsvarupa begins talking. Srila Prabhupada, we were all asked by the rest of the GBC to come to ask some questions. These are the members of the original GBC as you first made it up. So our first question is about the GBC members. We want to know how long should they remain in office? Srila Prabhupada, they should remain for good. Tamala says, they should remain for good. Srila Prabhupada, selected men are chosen, so they cannot be changed. Rather, if some competent man comes, he should be added. I shall recommend that Vasudeva become one of the GBC. Tamala Krsna, Vasudeva is Punja. He is the he's the builder of the temple in Fiji. Prabhupada, how many GBCs are there already? Tamala, 23. So add him, Srila Prabhupada says. GBC is not to be changed. Satsvarupa. But then in the event that some present GBC member then Srila Prabhupada says, another should be elected. Satsvarupa. By the votes of the present GBC, Srila Prabhupada says nothing, which means he agrees. Then our next question concerns initiations in the future, particularly at that time when you're no longer with us. We want to know how first and second initiation would be conducted. Srila Prabhupada, Yes, I shall recommend some of you after this is settled up, meaning the meeting. I shall recommend some of you to act as officiating acharyas. Tamala Krsna. Is that called Ritvik Acharya? Srila Prabhupada said, Ritvik, yes. Satsvarupa. Then what is the relationship of that person who gives the initiation and the, Srila Prabhupada interrupts, he's guru, Satsvarupa, but he does it on your behalf. Srila Prabhupada said, yes, that is formality, because in my presence, one should not become guru. So on my behalf, on my order, Amra Agyana Guru, Hana, be actually guru, but by my order, Satsvarupa. So they may also be considered your disciples. Srila Prabhupada, yes, they're disciples. Why consider? Who? Tamala Krsna. No, he's asking that these Ritvik Acharyas, they're officiating, giving Diksha, they're the people who are, they give Diksha to, whose disciple are they? Srila Prabhupada, they're his disciple. Tamala Krsna, they're his disciple. Repeating. And Srila Prabhupada says, who is initiated? He is grand disciple. Satsvarupa, yes. Tamala Krsna, that's clear. Then Satsvarupa says, then we have a question concerning, and Srila Prabhupada interrupts. When I order, you become guru. He becomes a regular guru. That's all. He becomes disciple of my disciple. That's it. Then Satsvarupa says, we have a question about BBT. So now I'm ready to answer any questions. If anybody has any questions, it may not have been so clear, but we'll have to see.
So I have a question because to my understanding, there was supposed to be an every 3 years, GBCs should be re-elected. So here we're hearing that, no, they should stay permanently. So
that's right. This supersedes the directions of management. And this is a very important point. I have here in my possession the original GBC document, directions of management, which I kept because I signed this as a witness with Karandar and Bhagavan, and they're not active. So I have it. I kept the original because I didn't want it to be lost. But I made sure the GBC had copies. So there's a part of the original GBC document that talks about, here it is. This is part 2 of particulars of the governing body commission. Number 2. His Divine Grace will select the initial 12 members of the GBC. In the succeeding years, the GBC will be elected by a vote of all temple presidents who will vote for 8 from a ballot of all temple presidents, which may also include any secretary who is in charge of a temple. Those 8 with the greatest number of votes will be members for the next term of GBC. Srila Prabhupada will choose to retain 4 commissioners. In the event of Srila Prabhupada's absence, the retiring members will decide which 4 will remain. This is a very complicated setup that involves all the temple presidents. And this has been cited as the way the movement's supposed to be going. But it was superseded at this last meeting. Srila Prabhupada was the one who approved of this GBC directions of management, and he changed the directions of management at this meeting on May 27, 1977, where we all heard clearly that he said the GBC, who are now chosen, should remain. And in the case somebody leaves, the GBC would elect someone else, a competent person. It's all very clear. So this was superseded. It wasn't written in stone. So anyway, so there's arguments about, well, Srila says when, and as if it was something he changed his mind about, because they say he never did appoint anybody. But it's true, it's clear. We just heard him say it, that he was going to appoint. And then up until July 9th, he picked all the men, the numbers that he said he was going to do. Remember, this meeting that we just described was all about the future. There was no question about devotees who were waiting to be initiated. That didn't even come up. As you can hear, that never even came up. That was explained July 9th because it kept coming up, because devotees were praying, crying, complain. They wanted to have Srila Prabhupada initiate them before he disappeared. So that arrangement was made July 9th. But the future after that was already explained in this meeting. That after you can't initiate, he said, you can't initiate in my presence. That's not the etiquette. And he explained what was to happen in the future, meaning after his disappearance. Disciples of my disciples, my grand disciples. The fact, he said, when I appoint guru, regular guru, he was explaining what he was going to do for the future, make arrangements for the future. And this idea that he never appointed anybody is completely incorrect. He hadn't at that time appointed anybody, but over the next few months he did. Because we were just discussing it for the first time there at this 27th May meeting. Nobody knew who he had chosen. He said, I will choose some of you. I will appoint some of you. But nobody knew who until he came out later with a list on July 9th. And he's asked, well, the question was there, you heard it. Well, whose disciples will they be when they're initiated after you disappear? He said, they were his disciples, he says. His disciples. My disciples are my disciples, my grand disciples. It's so clear. But people that weren't present at that meeting, who may not even heard it, or if they did, they misinterpreted. It was very clear because I have it all written out on transcript. It's the same. It hasn't been adulterated. This transcript I have is an exact duplicate of what we just listened to. No question. And on top of that, I have the GBC record book pages. Can you see it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, these are pages, copied pages of Satsvarupa's handwriting that went into the GBC record book after the meeting. Okay, I'll read it to you. Resolved. The following questions will be taken to Srila Prabhupada for his answers. They will be presented by a committee of Tamala Krsna Goswami, Satsvarupa, Jagadish Bhagavan, Kirtananda Rupanuga. First question, how long should GBC members remain in office? It's exactly what he asked. 2, how can GBC members who leave be replaced? Exactly what he asked. In the absence of Srila Prabhupada, what is the procedure for first, second, and sannyas initiations? The 4th question, what is the relationship of the person who gives this initiation to the person he gives it to? 5, is there any provision for publication of other translations? That's another thing. That goes to the BBT. Okay, those are the questions. Then he writes the answers, which went into the GBC record book, which we all signed off, and I can show you a picture of the page. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
All the GBC present who signed off on the meeting, meaning they understood exactly what the instructions were.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't have signed it. They had to sign off that whatever went into the GBC record book, they understood. Okay. So now let me read to you the questions that he got the answers. He recorded, Satsvarupa was our secretary. He recorded the answers, and this is what went into the GBC record book. Here it is, the page, a copy of the page. See it?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm going to read what's on it. For purposes of recording information, Srila Prabhupada's answers to the above questions are given as follows. 1, GBC members shall remain permanently. If a member leaves, the GBC can appoint new GBC members. 2, Srila Prabhupada said he will appoint several devotees who shall perform initiation in the future, even after his disappearance. The disciples they accept shall be their disciples, and Srila Prabhupada will be their grand spiritual master. 3, then it gets into the new translations of the Vedic works, which we're not concerned with right now. But this is very clear. The disciples they accept shall be their disciples, and Srila Prabhupada will be their grand spiritual master. This is what he recorded from the answer Srila Prabhupada gave. There's no difference. There's no difference. So that's just another verification. Now, after seeing his words that he wrote in his own hand that were appearing in the record book. All the GBC members present were asked to sign off their approval, their witnesses, as witnesses, to what went into the record book as a replication of the answers to the questions we asked. In other words, everybody knew what the purpose of or result of that meeting was. There was no question about it. Nobody raised a question. All the members signed it. Tamal didn't sign it because he was with Srila Prabhupada at the time, but all the 18 GBC members who were present, in addition to Tamal, all signed their names. I can't hear you.
I still have a question on the first point you made.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, if we just backtrack for a second, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so initially, Prabhupada stated that the GBCs, according to Dom, I think is what Pradyumna Prabhu was making reference to, that after such a period of time, GBCs would be reelected. That was the original, right?
Yeah. I may comment on that. That said every 3 years.
Every 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah, in 1973, there were no elections. In 76, there were no elections.
Right.
And in 77, Srila Prabhupada doesn't say, I'm canceling what we wrote in the original DOM. He just says it. He said, he was asked very clearly, what are they supposed to do? They're to remain unchanged.
Right. So I'm not asking you to speculate on Srila Prabhupada, but I'm just trying to understand myself.
Okay.
But in your opinion, why do you think Srila Prabhupada changed his mind on that? Or do you have any? Because I see some devotees are like, yes, Prabhupada originally.
Okay. Let me answer that.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, there was always a lack of leadership to choose from. Srila Prabhupada always had a problem when somebody would leave or somebody would resign. He always had a problem replacing because we didn't have that many persons who were competent to be leaders. That's my opinion. My personal opinion on terms of the fact that we did, I'm very happy that we didn't, because to elect every 3 years would have been a huge mass of politics. It would have been a disaster, in my opinion. A disaster, because that would mean that just like the modern politicians, they get elected for a couple of years, they spend most of the time campaigning for the next 2 years. So, and some of them, Srila Prabhupada says here that some of them may be retained, some of them should be retained, so and so on. So whatever we avoided, that's just my opinion. But whatever Srila Prabhupada said is not my opinion. He said it very clearly. In fact, I didn't mention it, but later on, after discussion about the BBT was finished, after that, the questions which were asked next, Satsvarupa said, that's all the questions. And then Srila Prabhupada said once more, he says, so there's no question of changing GBC? Satsvarupa says, no. Then Srila Prabhupada says, rather one who is competent, he can be selected to act by the board of the GBC. Then Tamala says, of course, if someone has a fall down, just like in the past, some GBC men have fallen down, Prabhupada, he should be replaced. Then Tamala said, then he should be replaced, but that's a serious fall down, not some minor discrepancy. Srila Prabhupada said, they must all be ideal acharya-like. In the beginning, we have done for working. Now we should be very cautious. Anyone who is deviating, he can be replaced. That was the end of it. So I didn't record that part, but that is right here in the transcription. So it wasn't finished. Srila Prabhupada was so emphatic about that, that after the discussion on the BBT, he raised the question again himself. So is there no question? So there's no question of changing GBC? Satsvarupa agreed. No. Rather, one who is competent, he can be selected to act by the board of the GBC. And then they go on. If he falls down, he has to be replaced. So that clears it up plenty. What Srila Prabhupada wanted. So in other words, the original direction of management was 1970, and now we're talking about 1977, the last meeting. We're talking about the first meeting in 1970. That was changed. So this idea that we're supposed to have elections every 3 years is bogus.
Okay.
It's because the persons didn't know what they were talking about. Obviously, didn't have access to this transcription or to the CD.
Right. So what is the response then to a devotee who had a GBC, has a GBC, who never, to the best of anyone's knowledge, had any gross fall down, but they're like a dictator. They're not a team player. They don't want to hear from their god brothers. What they say is absolute because they're Prabhupada's representative. They can kick devotees out of temples. They can ban
Okay,
them.
hold on a sec. Okay. The GBC was formed with one standing committee. It was called the Privilege Committee. I know because I was on that committee off and on for years. The Privilege Committee was a permanent committee created along with the GBC. What happened to that committee, I have no idea. But the committee was for the purpose of adjudicating debates between temples, between devotees, to handle grievances, to handle complaints about character, to all these things would have come before the Privilege Committee. For example, it came before the Privilege Committee that the gurus weren't chanting their rounds. And I was appointed to be as part of the investigation because I was on the Privilege Committee. And it was demonstrated beyond a question of a doubt that several GBC men were not chanting their rounds. And this was a complaint from several devotees. We had to investigate that. I also investigated about Silochan, went to the GBC and made a complaint that Kirtananda had initiated his wife without his permission and never said anything to him. Two godbrothers, right? So they handed that one to me. Huh. I interviewed Silochan, interviewed his wife. I interviewed Kirtananda. I interviewed Kaladri. And wow. Before I made a decision. And my decision was that Kirtananda was wrong. It was bad etiquette. He should not have initiated the young lady without her husband's permission.
Right.
Okay. And when this was published, somehow when I came out with it, but before I came out with that, I told Silochan, just wait for the decision. I was hinting it was in his favor. Just wait and stop the criticism. My opinion is your life is in danger.
Wow.
And he said, I'm armed. And I said, assassins don't care about it whether you're armed or not. So that was the end of it with his discussion with him. Okay. Then a week or so later, I said to him also in the conversation we had on the phone, I said, well, if you stop all this criticism of Kirtananda, maybe your wife will talk to you again. Maybe you can meet with her. Maybe you can work it out.
Yeah.
Okay. But all I got was, I'm okay. Anyway, so we know what happened. Somehow or another, this decision I made, which was printed, somehow it got into the newspaper. And Kirtananda was infuriated that something in the newspaper got about him doing something wrong. At the same time, we were having a series of meetings where devotees from all over the world were talking about reform in ISKCON. And the meetings were being held, there were 3 of them, were being held in New Vrindavan. And Kirtananda said, I'm going to stop these meetings. I'm not going to have any more meetings. He was so infuriated. So I convinced Balavanta, who was the GBC chairman at the time, to fly to New Orleans from Knoxville, Tennessee, where we both were, to convince Kirtananda not to cancel the meetings, because if he did, it would look like he was anti-reform. So he agreed to keep the meetings going. So 2 more meetings were held. Now, your original question, could you rephrase it? Was that answered? Yes. There's no contradiction. Listen, there's no contradiction here. Srila Prabhupada never contradicted himself in anything. Mm-hmm. Because he changed something, didn't make it a contradiction because he said something different before. Right. Srila Prabhupada was always consistent. When he's made that change, that was his prerogative. It was his movement. It was his GBC. He managed, actually, he was the chairman. Every time we had a meeting, that evening, we went for 3 or 4 days. We would go to Srila Prabhupada with our resolutions for his approval. We would have proposals, The proposals will be voted on, and the resolutions will be presented to Srila Prabhupada for his approval. And I might say that 9.5 out of 10 resolutions were approved. Sometimes you would add something. Sometimes you would say, discuss this some more. The resolutions were for 1 year, and they were to be examined the following year at the next GBC meeting as old business to see, well, what happened? Were these resolutions carried out? Were those people who had the responsibilities to carry them, did they do their job? Some resolutions went on over a period of years, like, for example, Krishna Balaram, Mayapur. These kinds of discussions would go on for some time. And those devotees who were assigned to those projects at that time, they would be reporting back on the resolutions that were made in reference to that project. Otherwise, all resolutions made were for 1 year. And those persons who were part of the resolution or who made the proposal, it was up to them and those who were assigned to carry out the resolution to report back to the GBC what had been accomplished.
So Srila Prabhupada came up with the name Privilege Committee?
Yes.
And why was it called Privilege?
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
It's a privilege, right? It's a privilege committee. So you have a privilege to come forth with a grievance. You have a privilege to come forth with asking for a solution to, and it was the privilege committee privilege to make the decision. And what happened was when the privilege committee made a decision, they would present it to the GBC body for approval. And 9 times out of 10, the GBC body would approve it. Whatever the decision was. My decisions that I made, there was never any objection. When I was chairman of the privilege committee, when I wasn't chairman, I was on it off and on for years, and I know exactly how the thing operated.
It sounds like to be on that privilege committee, one would have to have a lot of empathy for both parties to hear both sides. Like, kind of like, yes?
We didn't run for election. We didn't run for election. The GBC appointed us.
Uh-huh.
It sounds a lot like human resources at a workplace, you know.
I mean, I'll give you an example of one thing I settled. There was a debate between Atlanta and Miami about a loan that was made or money that was spent on a sale of something. And Atlanta had to reimburse. Miami had to reimburse Atlanta. I don't remember the details, but it was a decision that they had to accept. It was settled. And I was a GBC of the East Coast at that time, and I settled the debate, just like I would have done as a privilege committee. But if it hadn't been settled at that point, it would have gone to the privilege committee. See how well organized it was?
Yes.
But at the same time, we didn't have a treasurer. We had a secretary and we had a chairman for 1 year. We didn't have a treasurer. We had no treasury. Why do we need a treasurer? We didn't have a treasurer. GBC had no money to dole out to anybody, like the new GBC does.
No, I was told when I wanted to create a ministry of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, one of the responses I got back from a GBC deputy was that the ministry means money, and the GBC has no money to finance more ministries. And I'm thinking, I don't want money for a ministry. I just want to give a voice to Srila Prabhupada's disciples, because there's so many concerns they have that are just seem to fall on deaf ears.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say something, trying to remember what else my train of thought. Oh, yeah. No, we didn't have any money. GBC didn't have a treasury. And we didn't have, Srila Prabhupada said, the GBC can have a skyscraper, a GBC can have a skyscraper building with 200 clerks. What did that mean? It meant that he wanted the GBC to be responsible
Wow.
for his zone or for his duties, and he could have as much help as he wanted. We didn't have assistant GBCs. We didn't have co-GBCs. We didn't have deputy GBCs. We didn't have deputies. We didn't have nothing of that. We had no organization like that. And still we had over 23 members, or 23 members, half of whom became initiating gurus. So the GBC was divided between the uninitiating gurus or non-initiating gurus, and then the initiating. And that was a problem. That became a problem. We went to Sridhar Maharaj. They selected me and Kirtananda to go to tell him, explain to him what was happening. His initial response was, well, I'm not under the GBC. It doesn't matter to me what they do. Well, when I heard that, I was concerned a little bit. And then he said, when we explained to him, well, some of the GBC members are initiating and some of them are not. He said, the fit and the unfit. Then I realized that kind of an answer is not something we needed from anybody. We needed unification. We didn't need a bifurcation between the fit and the unfit. The GBC uninitiating, the ones who were not initiating, were not unfit GBC men.
Right.
And I want to make another point that there was no discussion at all about a limitation on future gurus. In other words, it's not that these 12 or 11 men were to be the final sampradayas in their own initiates. There was never a discussion about that, about a limitation on the future number of gurus. It was not discussed how they would happen or whatever. We knew that from the books, but we didn't discuss that these 11 men were the last in the line. And from them, everything would go on forward. That was never mentioned, never discussed.
What's your understanding of
Are we going to stick to this? Are we going to stick to what we discussed, to what we covered?
Yes.
Yeah, I actually have a few questions pertaining to what you said, if I can ask a question. Okay, a couple of things. The first thing I want to ask is, according to what you said, the DOM documents were overridden. So
no, not the whole document, not the whole document, that portion.
Okay.
Everything else remained.
So then what is the difference between how the GBC operated back then and how it operates now? Because you have a lot of devotees that will say GBC has been, deviating and not following instructions since so many years. And I'm just hearing you speak now, and it sounds like, well, maybe there's another answer to that. So what's the difference between back then, the way it was operating with Prabhupada, and right now, how it's operating with Prabhupada gone?
Well, all I can say is the purpose of the privilege committee would handle all that if there was some question of deviation or mismanagement. But I also have to add that Srila Prabhupada made it clear he didn't want centralization of anything in the movement except for for the BBT. He wanted everything decentralized. He wanted no bureaucracies. Bureaucracy, he was preaching against bureaucracy. So previously, when Srila Prabhupada was here, and even shortly thereafter, we didn't have this elaborate management structure that has now been set up like a regular corporation. And we were not registered either. The GBC was not registered as a separate entity or independent entity of ISKCON. It's now registered in India as a separate corporation. I'm not sure, but we never had any separate standing of our own. We were appointed by Srila Prabhupada to manage the movement. That was clear. I don't have it in front of me, but there is a classic letter about this management situation to Karandar about the way Srila Prabhupada wanted the movement managed. And he very made it clear at the end, the last sentence he said, so therefore, not this idea of centralization and bureaucracy finished, stop it. Mm-hmm. That was the last sentence. And I don't have time at the moment to find that letter, but I do have it. And many people have it. It's a classic. Mm-hmm. He said Karandar had written him about the devotees to make sure the devotees would continue to do their rounds and follow the directive principles. And how do we make sure they can do that? Srila Prabhupada's answer in a nutshell was, engage them according to their psychophysical nature, and chanting will become part of their work. There'll be no distinction between their service and the chanting. It will all be in their consciousness. It will all be part of, if you engage a person in their according to their psychophysical nature, and they'll be happily doing that, the chanting simply becomes part of their work. That's was his answer. So it was up to the GBC or whoever is in charge of a temple to make sure that he engaged the devotee. He was properly engaged. He was doing something that he was competent and wanting to do. As far as something you mentioned earlier about removing temple presidents, it is specifically mentioned in the directions of management that a temple president will not be removed without the voting approval of the temple members. It's right in here. In fact, what happened to me was when Damodar, who was in charge of the Washington, D.C. temple when they were downtown, wanted to resign. He was insisting on it. So I was going to accept his resignation. When I wrote to Srila Prabhupada about that, he says, no. He says, well, we must have approval from the temple devotees. So we did that. We had the devotees vote on. Of course, they approved because Damodar wanted to leave. But it made clear that the direction of management makes clear that a temple president may not be removed. I'm looking till I can find it here. Wait a minute, I know what it is.
Yeah, not whimsically, like basically with.
Will not be removed. Let's see. Here it is, section number 8 in section particulars of the governing body commission. Number 8. Removal of a temple president by the GBC requires support by the local temple members. Now, how are they getting support for all these arbitrary removals? Especially when all the new gurus were having the disciples move in and replace Srila Prabhupada's disciples.
Yes.
Heard this time and time again. It was a crushing blow. They had no legal right. This is our legality. This is our constitution. They had no right to remove temple presidents without support of, in other words, approval of the temple devotees. Now, there may be a case where they would have gotten the approval of all the temple devotees. I don't know. Maybe the person was so far off, but I don't know. I'm saying this should be followed. In fact, Srila Prabhupada corrected me in a letter that you must take a vote of the temple devotees, even though Damodar wanted to quit.
Mm-hmm.
So he expected this formality to be followed. And look, I do not believe the GBC even ever reads this thing. I don't think any one of them could tell you anything about it. This was never changed. This was never stopped. This was never dropped. And that's why I got the original copy in my hand, because I knew it was going to happen. I've got it right here. The original copy. I got my signature on it, along with Srila Prabhupada and Bhagavan Dasa and Karandar.
The title of it is?
The title of it is Direction of Management.
Right. So Prabhupada said we need to have an ISKCON constitution, and you said this is our constitution.
Well, let me say, he mentioned constitution, but he was referring to this. In 1976, he said he wanted a constitution, for sure. And there was a constitution committee, and I was a member of that committee. But when Srila Prabhupada disappeared, everything fell apart. All the committee, everything. It was like, things just didn't happen. So what I did, when he told us, he told the Constitutional Committee, he said when he made the order, I want a constitution. So we formed a Constitutional Committee, which I happen to be on. So he said, to get an idea, look at the Catholic Code of Common Law to get an idea. So he was referring to the 1917 Catholic Code of Canon Law, which was revised in the early 80s. So after Srila Prabhupada disappeared, as I said, everything just stopped functioning for a while because all the chaos. But I did get a hold of a copy of the revised canon law, Catholic Code of Canon Law, that was available in the bookstore. And I looked through it briefly. And what I understood by looking at that was, what they did was they explained the responsibilities, the character, the assignments, the disciplinary actions for everyone in the Catholic Church, from the cardinals on down to the altar boys. And I can understand this is their conception of Varna. This is their conception of Varnashram. This has to be included in the Constitution so that everyone would understand each role in the society and how men who are in that role were expected to behave, so that every member could have a standard to compare somebody's behavior with, right? And if there was some problem that didn't fit in the description of that person's duties, then there was a privilege committee, right? Or something else that someone you would approach as some system, some justice. There was justice. There was law and order in the movement. There was no child abuse committee. And when Dallas Gurukul became absorbed in so many problems, Shiva Baba had it closed down. He did not tolerate corporal punishment, even though he's approached several times by the heads of the educational departments. Could we use corporal? No. He said, if the teacher does not love the students, they should not be teaching.
All right.
And he said, you just hold up your finger. You hold it. He's like he talked about when he was in school, the teacher would grab their ear, or make them stand in a corner or something. In other words, you don't actually use corporal punishment. He would not approve of it. In other words, if the teachers loved the students, they would know how to deal with it in such a way to discipline without physical punishment. So what is that? Any more questions so we can move on?
Yeah, I mean, my other point is that it sounded like you said that there was some idea that GBCs would operate within certain zones. So does this mean that the zonal acharya concept is bona fide then?
Well,
because a lot of people complain about this too.
Srila Prabhupada called us zonal secretaries. We were zonal secretaries, his secretaries. My zone, the first zone the GBC gave me was from Montreal to Miami, out to Ottawa, out as far as the Mississippi River practically. It was me on the East Coast, there was Karuna on the West Coast, there was Satsvarupa in the middle. I had 12 temples. It was my zone. We were called zonal secretaries. So later on, that's where the zonal acharya idea came from.
Mm-hmm.
There was a time when, in order for you to be initiated by a particular guru, you had to live in his zone. You had to move there.
Yeah.
I made a proposal to the GBC and my proposal was that a guru should be able to initiate anyone in the world, anywhere in the world.
Yes.
What is this restriction? And it was turned down. Jai Pataka told me, "Well, I liked your purport, but I didn't like the proposal. My purport was what I just told you. People had to move one place to another to take it to have a spiritual master. If you wanted Bhagavan Das, you had to move to France or to one place with some country in his zone. It was ridiculous. But there was local armies or something. I don't know. Why so concentrated?
It was artificial. I know of several devotees who have resentment that they were forced to take initiation from a person that they were not even attracted to.
Because they were living in his zone.
That's right.
See that? Look, that's the problem. when you present a lineup of pre-certified gurus, what this does to the disciplic succession is it distorts it, because the prospective candidate for initiation, he's supposed to, according to Srila Prabhupada, sit in front of his proposed guru for 1 year at least. And similarly, the guru is supposed to be in front of his disciple for a year, because the disciple has to decide whether or not he's going to surrender his life to the spiritual master. That's a big thing.
Yes.
Right? So Srila Prabhupada, you cannot pre-certify anybody. The person who decides whether they're certified or not is the disciple. You follow that? You can't pre-certify any guru, because it's up to the disciple to decide who's certified, who he accepts. It's not that automatically the disciple doesn't have to worry about it. Whoever he chooses, it's okay. It's going to work out because they're all preordained. That's not the disciplic succession. That's not the way it works.
That was my next question. When you went, I forget who you went with. You spoke with Srila Sridhar Maharaj.
I went with Kirtananda. Kirtananda represented the gurus, and I represented the non-gurus.
Okay, the fit and the unfit.
Right.
But I don't agree with, because it seemed like it took till 1985 when we all went to New Vrindavan to contest the system that we'd been following for almost 10 years, because the contention was that there were several that were, although they were not acknowledged as initiating gurus, surely they were as qualified as those who were considered to be fit, who proved to not be so fit.
Okay, so you have to understand that at the time Srila Prabhupada disappeared, there was nothing in place for selecting any further gurus than the ones he appointed, not officially. However, there's places in his books and his lectures, like for example, in second canto, there's a quote there, the purport. He says, a Madhyamadikari is supposed to take disciples from the Kanishta and non-devotees class. Now, does that put limitations? Is there anything there that says he has to be approved by some governing body or something? It says he's expected to do that, just like a sannyasi. You don't tell a sannyasi whether or not to accept disciples. When Srila Prabhupada took his first disciple, his godbrothers wrote Sridhar Maharaj, who was a senior devotee at that time, what is Swami Maharaj, he's taking disciples, what's the position? So Sridhar Maharaj wrote Srila Prabhupada a letter, your godbrothers are questioning, now you've taken sannyasi, you're taking disciples, what's your position? Srila Prabhupada told the story to Prajumya, who told it to me. And Srila Prabhupada told Prajumya, he answered back, well, I thought that's what I was supposed to do.
Srila Prabhupada also said this to Keshava Maharaj. He said, well, sannyas is the father of society.
Yes.
And where there's the father, there must be children.
Yes. So it's the spiritual master of all the varnas and ashram. Anyway, sannyasi, if he's qualified sannyasi, he's qualified to have disciples. That's the parampara system. No sannyasi had asked permission to accept disciples.
So as far as you understand, Srila Prabhupada would not necessarily be in favor of an ecclesiastical system giving their seal of approval upon
Not
whether
necessary. He wouldn't be in favor of it all.
Uh-huh.
He told Siddhar Sarup, for example, who joined in Hawaii, he told Siddhar Sarup, you may take your own disciples. In his presence, Srila Prabhupada said. Siddhar Sarup said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to give them all to you.
Yes.
And he did that. A bunch of his followers became my godbrothers. Similarly, it was either Pushta or Tushta. He made the same. I think I made this point to you before. He told him, Pushta, was it? That you can have your own movement. He said that. And just don't change anything. Mm-hmm. See, that's the point. You don't change anything. That's the whole point. Srila Prabhupada said, my only credit is I never changed anything and I never cheated anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Those are only credits he accepted. So we have listen. We have persons who are watching this.
Yes.
So I thought, like the last time, we were supposed to have like a testing, like a little checking on how I could do it, and then it turned into a 6-hour thing where all other devotees had chimed in and they were asking questions too. But so far, I'm only getting questions from 2 persons, and if this is satisfying everybody else, fine. But what about somebody out there who has another question that you haven't asked?
Sure.
So where are they?
We have Vani here, and we have, I think Dayanidhi Prabhu is here. Yes. So if they have something they'd like to bring up.
Yeah, how do you know when somebody, do they push a button, they go buzz, buzz, or how do you know when somebody?
There's actually, at the bottom, it says reactions, and then you can hit raise hand.
Oh, I see a hand. There's a hand up. There's a hand.
Yeah.
Somebody's got a hand.
Krishna. Oops.
Haribol.
Haribol. I'm Vani. So I've been coming. I went to bed last night to Rupanuga's last 5-hour session. It was the best 5 hours I've spent in probably 2 years. It was wonderful, enlightening, seeing Sita Padi. It gives me hope. It gives me hope, and it makes me think I'm not crazy of, everything I've experienced my whole life. So I'm very grateful. So I do fulfillments for KBI. So I'm a hardcore original booker.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's very, very rewarding.
Well, the parampara is embodied in Srila Prabhupada's books, his original books. The parampara will be going on there. There's no question of their being discontinued or going out of print.
Yep.
Thanks to you and Väsudeva and others who are helping to keep it going.
Yeah, well, Väsudeva is my father.
Oh, good. Good father.
So the other day that I got really angry when the gentleman was saying, I don't, you don't know what you're talking about. I was at the table, cooking lunch for Hamsaduta and Bhagavan and Veda and Gupta, and went through all the court cases and out there selling paintings to raise money to fight for these original books. And we're still fighting. I mean, it is a fight like you can't even, well, I'm sure you can believe, but it's a fight, and we're still trying to raise Lakshmi to keep these original books going. So so I'm very inspired. So thank you so much. And Gora, thank you for putting this together, and Prajumna. I'm going to do what I can to get you those original Chaitanya Charitamritas as soon as I get home. So Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Yeah. So I'm also listening, but I'm working. This is Dayanidhi, and literally I'm picking up a customer rider in 2 minutes, so I'm going to have to actually leave. But thank you for talking, and I've listened to as much as I could for now. But thank you, Hare Krishna.
I will.
Oh, Gora, you're muted.
So there's nobody else that has a question?
Yeah, Henry Prabhu, do you have any questions for Rupanuga Prabhu based on anything you've heard today or from the last session? Have to unmute you, Henry.
Doesn't sound like it.
You're muted. Henry, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'm kind of here. Can you hear me?
Welcome back. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put the video on here. Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Just clicked off.
Yeah. And not really any question. I'm just, I guess the big challenge, what I see is that everybody get along, And I'm saying that from where I'm standing because, as you know, Gora, I have a devotee friend in Hamilton here who's having that problem, and maybe other devotees are having that problem of just getting along. And if we can get along, we can get so much done, right? And that's
well, to get along, there has to be a common denominator. And the common denominator between devotees is Srila Prabhupada Vani. Those who all accept Srila Prabhupada Vani automatically cooperate. And if they study the Vani, they know what to do. So the common denominator is Srila Prabhupada Vani. That's what makes devotees. Okay? If friends are going to be attached, it's going to have to be because Srila Prabhupada's in the middle.
Right, yeah.
Srila Prabhupada never went anywhere. He's in his books, he's in his lectures, he's in his photographs, he's in his deities. He never went anywhere. It's a question of our realization. And Rupa Goswami said there are 6 symptoms of love. If that's going on between devotees, there's no question of cooperation. He gave the 6 symptoms: giving in charity, exchanging prasadam, revealing one's mind. Of course, that doesn't mean just troubles, it also means realizations. That's what Ishtagoshis were for. So if devotees participate at Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet in their friendship, then they cooperate. Automatic. But you have to try for that. You have to try for that. And what's the best way to try for that? Listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures every day, and you'll hear whatever you need to hear. I guarantee it. There has to be association with Srila Prabhupada for our association with each other. Right? We have to have that common denominator between us in order for there to be any love, in order for there to be any trust. It has to be based on our loyalty and our service to Srila Prabhupada. And Krishna says, I reveal myself in proportion to one's service to my pure devotee. I consent to reveal myself in proportion to one's service to the pure devotee. You agree? You agree?
Yeah, makes good sense. I have 2 people in my life that both seem to be right into Prabhupada, and they're still not agreeing. So
that's because we're individuals. We can't agree on everything, but we have to agree on the main point. The main point is I accept Srila Prabhupada as the topmost spiritual authority in my life. Nobody can disagree on that.
Sure.
If they do, they got the wrong friendship. They got the wrong association. If you want to test who is somebody worth associating with, have them answer that question. Do you accept Srila Prabhupada as your highest spiritual authority in your life? That person's worth associating with. And I like to add, in my vetting process, are you against the revisions of Srila Prabhupada's books? I like to add that one. So it's 2 for me. To get in my house, you got to answer yes to both of them.
Mm-hmm. Makes good sense. I'll be ready with my answer if I'm ever coming to your house.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Prabhu, I'd like to ask a question about these revisions of the books, because you've explained some nice points in our last conversation, but what would you say to someone who says perhaps some of those changes were made because like they were not what Prabhupada actually intended to say in the first place. So, that's not what Srila Prabhupada taught, or that's not what Srila Prabhupada said. So therefore, this change is needed to reflect what Srila Prabhupada taught us. So what would you answer to someone like that?
I would say that's highly speculative. If you read something in the book and you say this is not what Srila Prabhupada intended, well, how can you make that statement? How do you know what he intended? We have to accept what's in the book as his intention, right? And he said to me in that classic letter of 1970, okay, before the BBT was formed, he said to me, our editing is to make corrections for grammar and punctuation only, and not to interpolate philosophy or style. That was a sentence. And that never changed.
That's
interesting. I have it right here verbatim. Our editing is to correct grammar and spelling errors only, without interpolation of style or philosophy. Srila Prabhupada letter to Rupanuga 2/1770.
That's so interesting because devotees will say, oh, the edits are there to, bring out what Prabhupada meant more, so it's more clear to devotees. But that's interesting that that's there, because that would pretty much refute any argument like that.
He says, if Srila Prabhupada says, he defines interpolate. It's also defined very nicely in Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. And if you interpolate, if you put something nonsense rubbish to show your so-called rascal's education, then it's spoiled, immediately spoiled. But let me mention, in addition to that, it's confirmed in Webster's Collegiate Dictionary. One of the definitions or examples of interpolation is extraneous subject matter. Now, this is very subtle. You can make a change using the philosophical language. You can even bring something from another place that's perfectly philosophically correct, but it's not needed there. Therefore, it's extraneous, even though it may be good philosophy. But if you think it's to be included there, that is called extraneous. Okay? It's already explained, and you want to bring something else in, even though you use the language, and even though it's related, it's extraneous. It's a very careful definition. You can interject something, you can omit something. This interpolation is a very decisive and definitive explanation. Srila Prabhupada used a perfect word, interpolate. Yeah, here's Webster's Dictionary definition of interpolation. Of interpreting something or the state of being interpolated. The introduction or insertion of something spurious or foreign versions. So in other words, it's unnecessary corrections. Very important, unnecessary. There were corrections that should have been made. But my point, I'm going to repeat this again and again. From 1970 until 1977, Srila Prabhupada gave 250 lectures on that book in 30-some cities and in 14 or 15 countries. Okay? Nothing ever came up from anybody, including the editors who were reading the book, memorizing the verses, giving classes, writing essays, preaching to non-devotees, and all the people who interviewed Srila Prabhupada's book. Nobody came forward with even a little handful of suggested corrections. Somehow or another, Planet of the Trees got by everybody, right? And all the other things that were supposed to make the book defective were there all those years. And there are 7 volumes of 200 of each of them, 600 and some pages long, of Srila Prabhupada's lectures on Bhagavad Gita, which would have extended the book for thousands of pages. I have the 7 volumes, and I went through them, and I differentiated those lectures that were made in the first 1968 version. I wasn't including those. I just included all the lectures on the 1972 version. And I noted where they were given, and what continent, what country, what city, and added it all up. And I find it just unexplainable why the editors and all those people associated with BBT didn't come forward to show Prabhupada before he disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And ask him such an important question as to revising the Bhagavad Gita. I also know that Ramaswar was the one who came up with the idea, went to Rabindranath Swarup and suggested that he revise the book. Rabindranath Swarup said, no, I suggest you go to Jayadodha. So the revision was not originally Jayadodha's idea. It was originally Ramaswar who approached Jayadodha, who was a member of the staff of BBT. He was a copy editor primarily, and asked him to do it. In fact, Srila Prabhupada and those rascal editors' discussion said that Ramaswar is backing all these things up. He's the one who's behind all these changes. So it wasn't Jayadodha Maharaj who came up with the idea on his own. He did come up with the idea on his own about revising the first canto. But at least he went to show Prabhupada about it. He was there to consult with. But the Gita was started, say, 1982 and finally came up in a revised version in 83. In fact, this is a fact. Rameshwar was going to print that Bhagavad Gita on his own without anybody else's approval. And I happened to hear about it. I was a GBC chairman that year. And I called up Rameswar. And I said, Rameswar, you're GBC man and you're also BBT. I said, you know, you can't on your own go through with something like this, but this momentous thing you're doing, you have to consult with the GBC. The layout, the book was on a layout table. He was going to print it and bring the book with him to the GBC meeting. But I said, no, you have to come to the GBC meeting and get approval to print the book in the first place because of the extent of this proposal. And so he agreed. That stopped the printing at that point. And then he came to the GBC meeting, the next GBC in Mayapur, and the GBC appointed a committee to look at the book to decide whether these changes. Now, I don't want to go into this any further, but I'll say that the committee recommended to the GBC that the revision be approved. And I think the GBC, I think it was like a 1-vote difference in their approval. There's still enough doubt. There wasn't a unanimous decision by any means. But because of that, then the book went to press. That's the history. I was the GBC chairman that year, so I pulled a little rank to get the book stopped so the GBC could check it. And unfortunately, everyone's so busy preparing for GBC meeting and so many things going on that the chances of having someone really look through it, we were under the impression that it was basically grammatical and punctuation like that. We didn't have any idea that 74% of the verses were going to be changed.
Wow.
We didn't have that. We had no way of knowing. In fact, Rameswar told me personally that that's what he was thinking. And he admitted that he didn't go through it like he should have. And he also said, Ridananda Maharaj told him the same thing. And these two men were on the committee to make a decision. So you throw in these things that happen in addition to the fact the idea wasn't originally Jayadvaita's, and you have a whole different, background here.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened, the printing of that book was one of the most divisive things that ever happened in this group.
Ramanath Prabhu, do you have a question you want to ask?
Yeah, two quick comments, kind of a question. In my talking with Brahma Muhurta Prabhu in Stockholm, the BBT manager there, I asked him this question about, why the 83 edition of Bhagavad Gita. He basically told me, as I remember, it had something to do with they needed a standard edited edition so that they were going to go ahead with all these translations into other languages, and they wanted to make sure that the edition that they used was up to date with this editing. That, as far as I understood, that's the motivation behind it. Yes, I think Rameshwar agreed to all that, and it wasn't exactly Jayadvaita's move or idea, but there was some thought process behind it that they actually, before they actually got involved with all the translation work into other languages, they wanted to make sure that it was a secure in terms of all this editing work. Of course, we know they over edited, but it was also part of that time, as you well know, it's part of the whole development of the zonal acharya era, and everyone was basically absorbed in narcissistic ideas of grandeur. And I sometimes think that Jayadvaita Swami fell into that trap himself. It was kind of like the self-appointed acharya of editing.
Well, those persons actually, the ones we were thinking about making it perfect for translations, they fell in the trap first.
Yeah.
They fell in the trap first. There are devotees right now who have already translated the original Bhagavad Gita into foreign languages, but they are not allowed to print. They're waiting for some option so they can print them.
Yeah, some option, exactly.
KBI doesn't have the right to print foreign books.
We just need you to put your camera down a bit, Rupanuga, because
You should tell me this. Like this?
Yes, that's perfect. That's
Better.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you doing? Seeing the top of my head or something?
No, from your mouth up.
Oh, well, why didn't you tell me sooner?
Because I've been inviting people to come and ask questions behind the scenes. I've emailed about 30 people in the last 10 minutes.
Okay, so.
May I make one comment about that, what you just said, Ramanath? As far as I understand, all of the foreign language translations are based on the edited books, not the original books. That's one very important point. And
not all of them. Not all of them.
I thought that was the policy of the BBT.
Those who are working under BBT.
Yeah.
But there are other persons.
Yeah, that's my next comment. I do know of devotees who have gone back and made translations off of the 72 Macmillan Gita, right, and they are publishing them independently. So that is going on.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have to deal with their local legal. Every country has their own situation as far as if they're operating within the law of their land, and not everything applies. U.S. law doesn't apply everywhere. So whether they're doing it legally or not, the point is to preserve that book.
Yep.
So
yeah, I know of for example, Russian devotees who have translated and are publishing independently of BBTI, and also Spanish. So I know of those devotees personally who are doing that. And they are actually, in fact, I encourage them, make your translation, print a huge stock of the books, and then just hang on to them. And then, you know, sell them as you can, but hang on to that stock, because later on things are going to change.
I'd just like to ask, so before 1972, devotees were reading Bhagavad Gita as it is. So why do we say, it seems to me like you're saying the 1972 Macmillan edition is the definitive edition of the Bhagavad Gita. Could you comment on that?
Yes,
Rupanuga?
sure. Yes, the first edition of Bhagavad Gita was the purple color edition. It was so heavily edited. There was no word for word. There was no Sanskrit. Many purports were missing. Srila Prabhupada was not very happy with that, but in order to get it published, Macmillan insisted it be edited. So when he said they revised, it wasn't the second 72 was not really revised. It was a complete edition that was all there all along. Ray Rama, who was editing that, he had to go through the original unabridged expanded version to edit it down to meet the demands of Macmillan Publishing Company. That's what happened. He had to go through it and edit it to make it small. Srila Prabhupada was not happy with it, but I was able to use it at my college program in Buffalo. In fact, the fact that I had a cover from the book was still in press when I went there, but at least I had a cover, a sample sent to me, and I used it for the committee meeting with the faculty committee and passed that cover around. They were impressed with Macmillan Company's book simply because it was Macmillan Company. And Allen Ginsberg had made a comment on the back cover, and Denise Levertov and Thomas Merton, and these were well-known figures at the time. So that book was a very important book. And many of them were distributed, and I used it for my class. But there's a big difference between that edited version. And it was the same manuscript. The only edition, the edition was made in 1969. Srila Prabhupada had a meeting in Boston, and Hari Griva was there, and so was Deoji. And Srila Prabhupada was talking about expanding the word for word, having word for word, and making it set up like he wanted it in a new, unabridged, definitive edition. But the manuscript was already there.
Mm-hmm. So in the 60s, you were reading the same book, but without the word for word and with less purports?
Half the purports are missing.
I see. So nothing was changed in between then and 72. And after 72, they started changing a lot of things. Is that correct?
Well, actually, Srila Prabhupada was talking in that meeting with Hari Griva and said, do you think as changes were made, were any changes made by Macmillan's editing staff? And he said, yes, there were changes. He said, what do you think? And Hari Griva said, I think they were good. He said, all right, leave them and they'll be, and put them all, he was talking about the verses, leave them all and put them in our new expanded version. If you take those and get Pradumya, we'll do the word for word and go over the Sanskrit and so on and so on. And we'll have all the original purports there in the book. That was a meeting in Boston in 1969. So Srila Prabhupada was planning on revising that book early on. You see, it wasn't done until it didn't come out until 72, but we're talking about 69. He was already making it clear that he was not satisfied with that book, and he wanted the full version to be printed. And Macmillan agreed.
So after that 72 edition, Prabhupada made clear statements that, okay, don't touch this anymore. Don't change anything anymore?
Well, he did. He didn't expect it to be changed. There was no one came to him and asked him for any changes. He pointed out a couple of changes himself, and they were fixed between editions. See, between printings is when the editors are supposed to approach Srila Prabhupada and say, before we print the next one, we think these corrections should be made. But that 72 Gita went through at least 6 printings. And where was the conception presented to Srila Prabhupada that something should be changed between these editions? We have to correct these mistakes. And that was the time when they should have been, questions should have been raised. So that Plant of the Trees went through 7 editions, or at least 6.
They changed it in 76. In the 76 version.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that Plant of the Trees went through a lot of, it wasn't changed until like 76 of it. Anyway.
Ramanath Sukha's had his hand up for a long time.
Yeah, another comment. I learned from Vaishya a few years ago. He came to London for Rath Yatra, and I asked him specifically, I wasn't focusing on the editorial changes, but the taking out of the incredible artwork that was there in the Macmillan edition. And I asked him, why did that happen? And he gave me this very strange answer that I'm still kind of puzzled by. He said something that back in the early 80s, they were aware of the printing costs had somehow or other gone way up. And in order to keep the prices low of the Gita, the next printing, that they asked the book distributors themselves. And at that time, in the early 80s, there's a lot of book distribution going on. Would you rather have a Bhagavad Gita that had less color prints and was cheaper, or would you like the Bhagavad Gita that had all the, the regular 72 Macmillan, it's over 40, I don't know how many, 44 or something, color
40.
prints, but the price would be like $1 more. And if you ask that question from the book distributor's perspective, they want the cheaper version.
Okay,
so
what year
they
was
can
that?
Distribute more.
What year was that?
I asked Vaishya, that was 3 years ago, but he was saying there was decisions made back in the early 80s, and the BBT formulated their decision-making process by asking the book distributors themselves, would you like the color prints to come out and have a cheaper Gita to distribute? Or would you like for them to stay in, but the Gita would be more expensive? And they said overwhelmingly that they want their paintings out. And that's based on that, that's what they made their decision to yank the artwork out. That's what Vaishya told me, something like that.
Well, just another symptom of the change disease.
Yeah, I mean,
Srila Prabhupada loved those paintings. In fact, in the original, listen, he's in the document, which I have a copy of the Macmillan Company contract, in which I signed with Srila Prabhupada as a representative of ISKCON. He insisted, in an addition being made into the contract, which is one of several, that the paintings were not to be copyrighted. They were his paintings to be used as he wished. Why? Because Srila Prabhupada felt those paintings were absolutely essential to help visualize the verse.
Exactly, it's part of his genius. I also thought, maybe you know more details,
not only that,
Prabhupada collaborated with the artist and said, I would like you to paint such and such a painting illustrating this philosophical idea.
Right.
And he knew that combination of philosophy and art would be a winner.
Right. Yes, because the conceptions that went into those paintings had to be approved by Srila Prabhupada. He approved of all of them personally.
Exactly.
And he knew, I mean, where are you going to get a book with 48 color prints for $10? Impossible. No. Impossible. In those days, it would have cost you 40 or 50. I mean, you don't just get color prints in a book like that. You go to any bookstore, check them all out. You won't find it. Hardly a pen drawing. The Srila Prabhupada knew how to sell books.
Exactly.
That was the point. Not to consult with the book distributors.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just the travesty of it all. The BBT is in charge of protecting Prabhupada's books, and they did that. Another thing Vaisheshika told me is that, the original cover art, the beautiful, Krishna Arjuna on the chariot, Bharat painting, so powerful, so dynamic. They consulted some printing company, said, oh, it's too colorful. It was for the 60s and 70s. Now you need to mute it and make more pastel-y colors. And so the new painting for the cover of the Bhagavad Gita is totally dull, impactful. And it surprises me that the devotees still think that this is what Prabhupada would want.
Can I present?
Exactly.
Can you see this?
I know what you're showing. I can't really see it so well, but yeah.
This. Can you see it?
No,
there's no comparison here.
There's no comparison.
It's an artsy craftsy cover here that doesn't really explain anything. It's
doesn't
too far.
Say anything. It's dull. It doesn't have any impact.
So
whereas,
yeah. Anyway, that's your.
Anyway, my point is part of the editorial changes is not only the working with the words, but they took out all the incredible art, changed the graphics, and that just it was just deflating the whole powerful presentation of Prabhupada's Gita when they did that.
I think it's a misunderstanding of the devotional spirit that went into those paintings. They look, years later, devotees who have painted the original paintings wanted to touch them up to make them more perfect. Srila Prabhupada didn't want that.
No.
Because the devotion that went into those paintings under Srila Prabhupada's supervision is amazing.
I mean, you think about it, those are painted in the early 70s, and that team of artists, they were fired up, chanting japa and morning program. They were Krishna conscious. And that Krishna consciousness went right into their artwork.
Yes. It was the conceptualizing was dictated from within, no question about it. It's impossible for an ordinary human being to conceive of those transcendental objects, the transcendental pastimes, how they were able to conceive of that to make it appear on a canvas. It's amazing.
Prabhupada's Shakti went into those paintings.
Yes.
He empowered those artists personally. I know.
Srila Prabhupada introduced a whole new art form, transcendental art. It never had been done before. And he knew this was going to make an impression on the minds of the Westerners. For example, they wanted to change the cover of the Upanishad and put Krishna instead of the Lord Narayan half emerged.
Yeah, the Vishnu, yeah.
And Srila Prabhupada says, no, don't you change that cover. I'm appealing to impersonalists. So he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
So
Ramachar has given some nice lectures to that account also.
I'd like to respond to both of you, if I may. The name of that book publishing, because I asked the exact same question of Vaisheshika Prabhu when he was in Toronto. What happened to the gorgeous cover? And Prabhupada loved it. Now it's very exactly the same point. And he said, well, we approached Greenleaf, I believe was Greenleaf or New Leaf, a big publishing company in America, and to get their opinion, and that was their opinion that, as you said, the more muted orangey cover would be more in preference. And I said, well, what about all the paintings that have been removed? And he gave me the same answer about the book distributors. He also said, we'll talk to Swavas about it. But I got this answer. Krishna gave me this answer. If KBI can afford to publish the Bhagavad Gita with all 48 paintings, then why can't the BBT do that as well?
Can I answer? I have an answer for that question.
I think they are, though. I think they do have a 72 Macmillan version now, after all of the, uproar. Go ahead, Rupanuga Prabhu.
They have thousands of unpaid book distributors who don't cost, they have no salaries, they have no social security. They're out there freely distributing. And there's thousands and thousands of them. There's plenty of money. There's plenty of money. And if there isn't, and they're not distributing the books, then that's another problem. But how many tens of thousands more disciples are there out now than when we were distributing those books when Srila Prabhupada was here? I mean, how many are there? There must be at least, I would estimate, with all the new gurus, there's well over 100,000 new disciples on this planet. And the amount of books distributed should have increased proportionately with that number. And where's the question of money? The point is, what you have to say, what would Srila Prabhupada say? And I'm thinking we should know what he should say. He would not approve of saving a few dollars or a dollar. If the book distributors, a dollar makes a big difference for them. That's their problem. Okay, it would cost $1 more or $2 more to print the book with all the paintings. That would be to the book distributors' advantage. But I happen to know also that one of the pictures they put in the book was that killing of the cow. And a lot of book distributors use that for shock effects on people. That picture shouldn't even be in the book. It spoils the whole book, because Srila Prabhupada told Ray Rama, when Ray Rama wanted to do a book, magazine, he was a BTG editor, the first editor. He wanted to do a story on butchery. And Srila Prabhupada wrote in a letter to him, don't you show a picture of a cow being murdered in my magazine, it will spoil the whole thing. And I wrote to the BBT in my essay, Change Disease and Windows to the Spiritual Sky. I made it clear, I gave that example, that that putting that picture in the Bhagavad Gita spoils the whole thing. And nobody cared. Nobody ever changed it. In fact, they have made dioramas of it.
Yeah, that's true.
They have made dioramas of that. And they're distributing this revive. They took out the 48. They took out all the pictures of the succession. They put in a couple more pictures that replace the original pictures that aren't even conceptually correct. And I explained that in my essay, how they were conceptually incorrect. What to speak of that cow being murdered. But the BBT thinks they're impervious. They're impervious because it's their book, it's their copyright, and they can do what they like. That's what they think. They don't care about the opinions of Srila Prabhupada's disciples who are outside their jurisdiction. See, they don't care. And if they do change anything, it's because of pressure. As far as they're publishing Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, several years ago, the BBT India published over 200,000, in which they had a little stripe on the front that said original edition. And they sold a number of those books to BBT in LA. They may well be the ones they're still distributing. They don't advertise them, they don't push on them. That was BBT India. And BBT India has printed the original Bhagavad Gita a number of times over the years. I have a copy here printed in 2010. A full hardback with all the paintings. So BBT India it's not a new city. They have been printing them. And they also, as far as I know, print the revised versions too.
Do they still have the BBT website up that was giving all these fallacious arguments why they did the editing changes? Is that still up?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
BBT edits. I don't think BBT edits. That was all defensive. It was all technical, grammatical rules and regulations.
They were trying to answer questions, but to me, they were making more questions rather than answering questions, and not allowing any kind of dialogue or feedback.
No, there's no dialogue. Besides that, my opinion is that all the corrections made are requiring more corrections than the original book. Their corrections require more corrections. So anyway, that's always a controversy.
Rupanuga Prabhu, what do you think of Garuda's efforts that he's trying to do in terms of trying to reestablish or reevaluate the editing policy of BBT?
Good luck. Good luck. You're talking about a vested interest. You're talking about a society that is as much based on a means of livelihood as anything else. And when Srila Prabhupada, he got a letter once from Radha Vallabha, who was a manager. He was got a report from him, in which Radha Vallabha said, "We have just reduced our monthly budget by $5,000 by releasing some of the staff." And Srila Prabhupada wrote back, "You're paying salaries? We don't pay salaries." He said, "The scientists don't take any salaries." He was talking about BI. So he stopped it. We realized you're saving money by the salaries you're not paying. But I never told you, I never gave you permission to pay anybody's salaries, right? So around the movement, salaries are being paid to a number of different, maybe.
Look, I'm here in London. The Soho temple is actually pretty pure, but the manor is all based on salary, everything.
I'll explain to you what Srila said about that. I read it, explained this at the last meeting, that Srila said to take a salary for service is not good, because it means serving the money instead of the cause. Serving the
Karma
money.
Mishra Bhakti.
It's Mishra, mixed. Karma Mishra Bhakti. It's mixed. You see, we never paid salaries. I mean, we never even thought of such a thing. You know. So anyway,
I mean, it's a long-standing thing at the manor. They've been doing it for decades.
Yes.
And to change the system is draconian. But it was draconian when they changed it 20 years ago.
Let me read to you a statement from Shakespeare. You know, Srila Prabhupada liked Shakespeare. He said, if you want to understand human nature, study Shakespeare. So I'll read to you what Shakespeare said. This is from Hamlet. He says, "The monster custom, whom all sense doth eat." So to say that we've been doing this for decades, that's the monster custom. And eats all good sense. It's not intelligent. It's not a reason. It's just a repetition. Like when I went over to the temple here in Alachua once, and they were showing the 10 offenses, and every morning everyone would look at the 10 offenses and they recite them. But one of the 10 offenses was listed as an 11th offense, and it said inattention while chanting is also an offense. So I went over there. I said, "Wait a minute, inattention while chanting is a major offense. It's already in the list. Why you say it's another? What they replaced inattention while chanting where interpretation or some other thing they put in there. You see, I don't know where they got it. But the 10 offenses include inattention while chanting." And he said to me, "Well, we've been doing this for so many years." That was his answer. I said, "Look, I've got it in handwriting from Srila Prabhupada's original handwriting. Here are the 10 offenses right off the wall in the storefront. Here it is." He said it. It's right there. Inattention while chanting. What are you putting in there instead to make it the 11th? He said, "Oh, we can't change. Let me go to Pushkar and discuss with him," whatever that means. And so they never changed it, as far as I know. So his answer was, "Well, we've been doing this now for 10 years, 15 years. How can we change it?"
No, I agree with you. I mean, it's a weak excuse. But in order to change, at least what's going on here with Bhaktivedanta Manor, requires strong management, and that's what they don't have. They don't want that kind of management. They just want go along to get along kind of management, which is what they have with Vishaka Mataji. She doesn't challenge it. She just goes along to get along.
Well, there's no law and order.
She also gets a good salary going into her bank account every month too.
There's no law and order in ISKCON, but there's law and order outside of ISKCON. And that's
why I say, what about the Constitution? Without a Constitution, no law and order.
That's right. That's why we don't have one.
Where can we read this original 10 offenses you're talking about, Prabhu? Because I myself, it's true that they say it's also an offense to to be inattentive while chanting, you know, but I'm curious now what you have in writing there from Prabhupada when he described the 10 offenses.
You hold on a second, I can show you a copy. I wasn't thinking I was going to have to show this, but I have a copy hanging on my wall, and I can actually send you a copy.
That would be great. Yeah.
Prabhupada's handwritten 10 offenses. Inattention while chanting is one of them. Let me see here. I don't know. Let's see. Hold on.
That's the original handwritten one from Second Avenue. Then
That's
it's
right.
a Nectar Devotion, but those 10 offenses are originally in Padma Purana.
I'm not sure where they come from, but Srila Prabhupada writes them. That's where they come from for me. Especially in his own handwriting. No question of a typing error or someone else doing it. It's all in his handwriting.
Oh, Garuda's here.
I don't have it handy, but I can show it to you next time, maybe, or some other time. The original 10.
Rupanuga Prabhu, you can wish Garuda good luck. He just joined the Zoom.
I just invited Garuda Prabhu since we were discussing him. Hare Krishna, welcome.
We weren't discussing Garuda. We were discussing Srila Prabhupada's Gita.
Yes, but Ramanath Sukha made reference to him and asked you your opinion.
And you very succinctly said, good luck.
Hare Krishna, Garuda Prabhu, welcome. Can you unmute yourself for a moment? He'll be on in a minute. Okay. Anyway, at least Garuda Prabhu got a blessing from Rupanuga Prabhu of good luck.
Good. Can I make?
Nahush Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. I just want to make a quick comment / suggestion. Now that I'm coming from an engineering background, so what I'm trying to say, like from the history of what I've heard from another Srila Prabhupada disciple of how the BBT Inc. had taken over the publishing of the books, what I was thinking is with the new blockchain technology, could we possibly come together to finance from a decentralized way so that it doesn't, get infiltrated, etc., or subverted, to print the original books, and then it will have to. I don't know. That was just an idea. I mean, I don't know who can lead it, the effort, but if we can support it with the new blockchain decentralized money format, then at least we can have those in supply and kind of help wake devotees up.
One point that I brought to the attention of Vedaguya Prabhu in my one and only discussion with him, I think he was in Hawaii at the time, is that Prabhupada's statement to Karandar Prabhu was that 50% of all profits of selling BBT books must go to ISKCON building projects. And I said, do you do that? As far as I know, that's not being done. So a couple of responses I got is, not even the BBT gives 50%. And I checked with Jayadvaita Swami, and he said $350,000 was given. I don't know if it was specifically to the Temple of Vedic Planetarium or if it was a variety of building projects. But Vedaguya Prabhu's reply to me was, when they were in the courtroom and they were settling all of this issue about who has the right to print Prabhupada's books, that Jayadvaita Swami it was not stipulated that 50% from KBI had to be given to building Prabhupada's building projects. But I'm thinking, but what does it matter what Jayadvaita Swami or anybody else thinks of, whether you get his permission or not? We know that Prabhupada stated 50% of the profits of selling my books must go towards ISKCON building projects. So
that's incorrect.
that's incorrect?
Yeah, 50% goes to the BBT.
Yeah, and the other 50% goes to building projects.
Right.
But, I've spoken with Chidarati about that. He does donate to some projects. So, at 50%, I don't know, he's not audited either. And I just wanted to say, Nahush, I think that's an excellent idea because that can preserve exactly, the fidelity of Prabhupada's books, all of them, not just the Bhagavad Gita. They should go on the blockchain. Yes, yes, yes. I'm in for that.
Yeah, and I can talk to my friends about this. I have one devotee friend which is very much active in this space, and yeah, I think he's the same opinion when it comes to the vaccines and stuff. So, pretty similar mindset. So, I personally am not rich at all, but I can definitely we can set up an infrastructure. It can help fund it, and we can do it in a way that we're preserving the books and in the line as Srila Prabhupada wanted, in hopes for the next a moonlight devotee to come and help revive everything. At least we can, and then that intention we can do it.
I'm sure a GoFundMe account would certainly be able to raise some money without any problem.
Yeah, we can then put it in the reason about it is it's the blockchain is, what is it called? I'm forgetting the word, but it's decentralized. So in a sense, the account holders that have it, as nobody has to know who, what I'm trying to say is it's much less prone to financial corruption. So, from any outside influences, and we can help run it.
Any change that's made in it can immediately be detected. So it's a way of preserving documents without any question. So it's an excellent, wonderful idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Garuda Prabhu, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. I have a rare moment. Obeisances to you, Prabhu. We have the good fortune of having Rupanuga Prabhu here with us. And I'm wondering if you may have a question for him, whether it's regarding, mostly we've been talking about the book editing issue in the last bit, but I'm just wondering if you'd like to share anything.
Oh, I'm just here to get the darshan of Rupanuga Prabhu and the other fine Vaishnavas here. I am doing about 3 things at once here. I have to admit, I'm trying to get a proposal done. But I'm here to any chance to have the sangha with Rupanuga Prabhu. I'm on. So.
Right.
Okay, so now we're back to me. I want to show this picture of the 10 offenses.
I had one real quick comment on behalf of KBI that, almost all of the funds that we raise go back into printing more books, and we keep expanding the original books. We support the Festival of India. So well over 50% of the money that we take in does go back into the organization. It goes into fighting these very, very expensive, it's so expensive, the lawsuits that we're fighting right now to keep the original books. We've now got teachings of Queen Kunti, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Beyond Birth and Death, POY. Just printing these thousands of books. And we house, we used to, Prahlad Nishringa was one of our biggest book distributors, and losing him was devastating to our organization. And we fund a lot of the shipping and so forth. So KBI gives well over 50% back into keeping the mission going and keeping the original books going.
Thank you, Vani.
Can I show this now?
Yes, please.
Here, a picture of the 10 offenses in Srila Prabhupada's handwriting. Okay, and on this list, number 9 is to become inattentive while chanting the holy name. Let me read them.
Yeah, please. I was going to ask you, could you please read them for me verbatim there?
I'm going to read them from Srila Prabhupada's list. The first one is, well, first the title is 10 kinds of offenses should be avoided while chanting the Mahamantra. Then he chants the whole Mahamantra. Then he says, list of offenses. 1, blaspheming a Lord's devotee. 2, considering the Lord and the demigods on the same level or to understand that there are many gods. 3, neglect the orders of the spiritual master. 4, minimizing the authority of scripture of Veda or Vedas. 5, interpreting the holy name of God. 6, committing sin on the strength of chanting. 7, instructing glories of the Lord's name to the unfaithful. I have a lot to say about that one.
Mm-hmm.
Then comparing the holy name with material piety. There's a lot to say about that. To become inattentive while chanting the holy name, number 9. And number 10, attachment to material things in spite of chanting the holy name. And then under that, in big letters, he writes, try to avoid the above offenses, and underlines the word offense.
Amazing.
So one of these things that neglecting the orders of the spiritual master is probably one of the biggest problems facing the Hare Krishna movement and its manifestation as ISKCON. Minimizing the authority of scriptures or Vedas. Well, that's another question. To become comparing the holy name. Here's one: instructing the glories of the Lord's name to the unfaithful. I have a CD of Srila Prabhupada giving a lecture in 1970 in LA on the 10 offenses. And the way he explains this one about the unfaithful, I before that thought about preaching to an intoxicated person. But that's not what Srila Prabhupada taught about. He said that a spiritual master who initiates a person to the holy name without determining his faithfulness is an offender. And what was that way Srila Prabhupada determined faithfulness in the holy name? After all, this is the movement of the holy name, right? The Yuga Dharma, right? So the first initiation is not unimportant compared to the second initiation, which we hear from some quarters. It's the holy name, initiation to the holy name requires faithfulness. And how did Srila Prabhupada determine that? 6 months of chanting 16 rounds, 6 months of following the 4 weekly principles. That determined that a person was faithful enough to the holy name to get initiation. Right now, in various places around the world, the holy name is taken as an encouragement. Initiation of the holy name is taken as encouragement. Instead, emphasis is placed on Gayatri. An emphasis is placed on the Raghunuga over Vaidhi Bhakti or Sadhan Bhakti, which Srila Prabhupada never did. He explained what it was, but he never considered the holy name to be simply an encouragement and not without proving faithfulness. He said if a person is not proven faithfulness when he gets the holy name initiation, he will go away in due time. So in the short Gopi lives that we have, 6 months is a long time to chant 16 rounds and follow the regular principles, especially following the regular principles of illicit sex in the Western world. In that connection, when Srila Prabhupada was on a morning walk, one honest grahasta asked him, what do we do? What happens if we have illicit sex? And Srila Prabhupada answered, fast 3 days. He gave fast 3 days as the answer. That was his atonement, a legitimate atonement. Srila Prabhupada gave an atonement. So neglecting the orders of the spiritual master. I mean, If there's anything that's created more controversies, I don't think so. Neglecting the orders of spiritual master. There's a long list. A very long list. That's a very important one. And well, I just made comments on those two. Instructing glorious the Lord's name to the unfaithful and neglecting the orders of spiritual master. And also there's another one that's become very popular, comparing the holy name to material piety. It's their interfaith meetings and so on. And there's a definition that was presented at the 50th anniversary celebration in Washington, which is held up on Capitol Hill. And the definition was given at that time, if I can find it here, that defined ISKCON in terms of heritage. This was an official statement from the Public Relations Department defining ISKCON. ISKCON is a Gaudiya Vaishnava, parentheses, monotheistic tradition within the broader Vedic or Hindu family of faiths. Now there's 3 nam-aparads in here. And there's one sentence. To liken our movement to Hinduism, Srila Prabhupada many times made it clear to differentiate his movement from Hinduism, stating that it wasn't even a word in the Sanskrit language, to make it short. To consider a tradition within the broader Vedic or Hindu, to consider Vedic and Hindu as synonymous is minimizing the authority of Vedic scripture. Number 2.
Wow.
3, the broader Vedic or Hindu family of faiths. Family of faiths. Sanatana Dharma is not a faith. It's a fact. We don't belong to any Hindu family of faiths. Another really brilliant phrase coming from the PR department was devotional Hinduism. That's a beauty. Brilliant PR. But there's 3 namasparads in this one sentence defining ISKCON in public. This is an official statement.
Can you read it again, please?
Yes. ISKCON is a Gaudiya Vaishnava, parentheses, monotheistic tradition within the broader Vedic or Hindu family of faiths. We won't get into what monotheistic may mean. And I'm sure someone can find another namaparad, which is unfortunate because this movement is the movement of the holy name. And we don't want to give people the wrong impression. But this certainly is not the Hare Krishna movement that Srila Prabhupada brought to America, the one that I joined in 1966. This is not it. If you wanted to make a difference between the Hare Krishna movement and ISKCON, it looks like there's a reason to do so. If ISKCON's defined by this, that ain't the Hare Krishna movement. What is it? It's an organized religion. It's replacing the cultural alternative and educational institution that Srila Prabhupada introduced. This movement was intended as a cultural movement to replace the overriding paradigm based on Darwinism and Buddhistic science. BI was a challenge. BI was a challenge to that overriding worldview. I was there when the BI was officially formed in 1976 in New Hastinapur Dham, now called Potomac. Srila Prabhupada was there for days in which he discussed with the members of the BI the mission, and I was there. My job was to organize and raise funds and recruit. Of course, it never got any further after Srila Prabhupada disappeared in 77. A year or so later, things became topsy-turvy. But the mission was clear. It was a challenge. The book was entitled Life Comes from Life, to challenge this idea that life comes from chemicals. That was the whole thrust of the BI. And I had the pleasure a couple of years ago to meet a devotee who understood that. The only other person I ever met that understood that as the real mission of BI. And he hadn't known anybody else either. And somehow we met each other here in Alachua. And he just recently wrote a book. I'm looking for the copy now. In which he addresses that issue and writes all the different claims by material scientists, and he defeats them very logically and correctly.
Is that Purna Pragya Prabhu?
Yes, Purna Pragya, who has written a number of books that were published in BBT India. He did summary studies of Mahabharata, of Bhagavad Gita, and
it's right here. It's right here.
Yeah, Life Beyond Darwin, a critique of abiogenesis, which means chemicals. Life comes from chemicals. So he's written this book, and this book, I believe this book should be read by every devotee because it's got plenty of ammo. It's got plenty of logic and reasoning to defeat this modern Darwinistic idea, which is still called a theory. They don't call it a law yet. It's still a theory, and they teach it like it's a law. And everybody believes it. And this idea that we're born to die has got everybody running around mad after sense gratification. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die. The local obituaries have lists of people under 50. So people are driven by this desire for sense gratification because they think when they die, it's all over. There's no life. Oh, there's only one life, you know. We only live one life, you know. So that's all based on this. And Srila Prabhupada said, these material scientists are the greatest enemies of mankind. He said, this Darwinism is our greatest grief. Now, if that isn't an impetus to challenge this pervading paradigm, I don't know what is. If it's a grief to our master, if it's the greatest enemy of mankind, well, that's the opposite of Vaishnavism. It's atheism in different dress, just like communism, like socialism, atheism in a different dress.
Scientism. Now people are saying, I trust the science. We have to trust the science.
Right. They don't know what the science is. The science is found in Bhagavad Gita. That's the science. What's the science? Science means scientific method. You have a proposal, you have a hypothesis, and you have a demonstration. Otherwise, the scientific method is not complete. You have a theory, but you have to have a demonstration. And that demonstration has to be repeatable in different places. So this Darwin theory remains a theory. There's been yet a demonstration of one species evolving into another. And even if they could produce life from matter, even if they could produce an embryo in the lab, so what? There are 6-7 billion of them out there already. Are you going to get credit for one? We have a creative potency because we're parts and parcel of Krishna. But if to create a planet, is that a big deal? There's 1 million planets in this universe or more. You see, this is a competition with Krishna, and that's what the whole problem is about. You add that to all the killing fields all over the planet where buildings have been constructed for the slaughter of cows, bulls, fish, turkeys, chickens, you name it, all for the taste of the human tongue. And people, Srila Prabhupada said, can people expect peace and prosperity? No way. This whole thing happening right now is simply a rollout, a karmic payback for these killing fields. And all this discomfort and all these mandates and all these other things are all simply a delivery systems for a karmic payback. And what are all these protests about? Really? What are all the complaints about limitations? Really? They're actually really complaining about limits to sense gratification. Oh, I can't go here. I can't go there. I can't go to the restaurant. I have to have a pass. You're limiting my freedom. But freedom is a spiritual issue. Freedom, we had to go to court to get the freedom to chant in the streets in this country. We had to go to court to get in the malls. We had to go to court to get in the airports. So freedom became a spiritual issue. If you want to make it a material issue, that's another thing. But these devotees, when they went in New Zealand and risked their lives and whatever, to really deal with the real issue, the real spiritual issue is the freedom to chant. Behind the Iron Curtain, the devotees, they couldn't chant in the streets. They couldn't even chant at home. It was illegal behind the Iron Curtain. There was no freedom. And Srila Prabhupada came back from his 3-day visit in Moscow. He said, this communist government is a terrible, terrible government. When I heard that, I knew they were finished. Just a matter of time. That was like a curse. And he said, the Russians, they want their freedom. They're Europeans too. So freedom is required. He said, if a government is against the movement, it cannot succeed. So the movement succeeded starting in America because the First Amendment. So freedom is an issue. And what these people don't understand, that freedom really means the freedom to chant and the freedom to see devotees on the street. That's freedom. And when Srila Prabhupada said, the power's in the people, he told me that. The power's in the people. What power is he talking about? Changing presidents? No, he's talking about the dormant Krishna consciousness that everybody has in their hearts. And we're the only people who know how to ignite that. We're the only people who know how to release that. And whenever there's a crowd, we're going there. We're going to go there so they can hear the holy name. We're going to go there so they can chant in response. We're going to go there so they can get some prasada. Because we're the only ones who know what the purpose of life is. We're the only ones who know, just like Srila Prabhupada, he called his party, the political party we were discussing at one time, he called it the In God We Trust Party for Purified Leaders. And there's another place he says, we're looking forward to the time when the public will join us in our protests against impure leadership. That's the real protest. But we're dovetailing this other one because it gives us a chance to let people hear the holy name. And let me say one last comment, and that is, when you have a big thing like Woodstock or some of the big meeting like that where the rock and roll goes off into the atmosphere, it goes out into the atmosphere for 7 times. It revolves around the planet 7 times. And Srila Prabhupada said that when the holy name goes out in the atmosphere from all this japa, from all these kirtans, from all these festivals, it goes around eternally. And so that's what's happening. It's the science. The science is that the very atmosphere of this planet is being purified. And that is what the golden age is all about. That's what we've been doing since 66, 65. We've been purifying the very atmosphere to receive Lord Chaitanya. That's our duty. And these books, where do they go? They go home. People take them home, into their homes. And the Perfection at Home program is when they read those books and chant with their friends and relatives. That's what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught Kurma Brahman, who wanted to go with him preaching in the south of India. He said, no, you remain home, you invite your friends, you read Bhagavad Gita, and you chant the holy name. And when Kurma Brahman followed him anyway, Lord Chaitanya looked back, the verse says, and took care to send him back home. And I may remind you that this movement began in people's homes. It was Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who told all the devotees in Navadvip to chant in their homes. And it raised such a din that the local Muslims went and complained to the Qazi. And when the Qazi came, he went in somebody's house and broke the Madanga.
Mm-hmm.
He broke the Madanga in the house. Home invasion. And that's what got the movement started. Then Lord Chaitanya, who was at the age of 20 years only, gathered 100,000 men with torches, and they went to convince the Qazi. And the Srila Prabhupada said, the Shringadev came to convince the atheists. So this movement is to convince the non-devotees to chant the holy name and read Srila Prabhupada's books. And anybody who thinks Srila Prabhupada went anywhere is all wet. He never went anywhere. He's in those books. He's in his paintings. He's in his photos. He's in his deities. He's in his lectures. He's right there in sound. And anybody who thinks that Srila Prabhupada went anywhere doesn't understand this movement. Srila Prabhupada Vani is the shelter of the parampara. And the opulence of the conditioned soul is the humility enough to accept that instruction.
These words, perfection at home, does this come from an essay or article from Srila Prabhupada himself?
In 1973, maybe, I was in Srila Prabhupada's room in Krishna Balaram temple. And I saw a table, a small table there with glass top, and underneath of it, there was an essay that was apparently written by Srila Prabhupada, unpublished essay, written sometime in the 50s. Mother Deva Shakti was in charge of Srila Prabhupada's quarters, keeping them proper. And I said to her, could I see this? Could I see this essay? So she went and she opened the top of the table, and she gave me the essay, and she gave me a typewriter, and she gave me paper with carbons to type it. The name of the essay was Perfection at Home. That's where I got it. And that's what I believe the next stage in this movement is. Outside, beyond the organizational, organized religious outside presentation, I'm talking about not the form, but the substance. And if you want to have a cultural movement, it's got to be rooted in people's homes. Otherwise, you don't have a cultural alternative. Mm-hmm. The people took the books home. They've got to take the holy name home. And as Srila Prabhupada said, our movement is not a churchianity where people come once on Sunday and come back again next week. Our movement enters into every phase of life. It's a cultural movement. And he said this is an educational institution. We're supposed to be educating people in Varnashram Dharma. When Balavanta was preaching in politics, Srila Prabhupada told him, I saw the letter. He said, preach Varna to the people.
I really appreciated you saying that freedom is actually a spiritual matter. And I was hearing World Economic Forum top scientists, he was saying that now the human being is simply a hackable animal, and there's no question of mystery or soul or spirituality. I don't know what's going on in my body. Now we know everything, and we can program your DNA and we can control evolution. There's no need for God to control anything because we can control our own evolution.
So my answer to that is, where is BI?
Yes.
Where's BI? Where's the challenge to the greatest grief to mankind?
Well, instead that we're hearing, we shouldn't upset these leaders. We shouldn't upset the government. We shouldn't upset the World Economic Forum. We should play along so they, give us our rights, to keep giving us our rights. But you can see clearly the agenda is atheistic and it's demoniac to the core.
Yeah. Yes. So we shouldn't be in lockstep with that. We don't want to be assimilated into their culture. Srila Prabhupada didn't send his book, his Bhagavad Gita, out for review to all of those academicians and scholars for their authorization. He wanted their authentication. He didn't need anybody to authorize what he did, but he wanted them to accept it. And that's the position we're in. This movement has to be accepted on a wider scale. And I believe that wider scale is to preach to people, this movement is for you personally. It's not for us, for an organization. It's for you to take home and introduce it in your private life. Because we want a cultural movement. We want to plant roots in society. So it will endure perpetually, like Srila Prabhupada said. That's what it was. I have to read this. Where is it? Last letter to me, he wrote that he wanted to come to America. And he wanted.
Was that in? Is that 1977? His last letter to you?
Yes. And he said he wanted to come to America to have a meeting with all the leaders so that he could strengthen the movement to endure perpetually. What does perpetual mean? We never found out, but it's obvious. Permanent. That's what a culture is. It's something to endure for the next 9,500 years, based on Srila Prabhupada's books. So we have to learn how to explain to people. They have to go home and experiment, introduce this chanting, introduce these books into their private life. And they've already got the books because that's where they went when you gave them to them. You gave people a book. What did they do with it? They took it home with them. So we want them to take the holy name home with them. They've already got the deities. The books are all deities. Srila Prabhupada said they were deities. They're deities in their homes. He even said if they put a picture of Panchatattva in their homes, they would be worshiping Lord Chaitanya. And if they did that, they would become God realized. So these books are written for individuals to study and to learn. That's why when someone said you cannot get Divya Jnana through a book, you have to have a person in front of you, they were wrong. Divya Jnana comes through sound vibration and through the written word, which Srila Prabhupada called recorded sound. Divya Jnana is in his books. And a person who reads those books and believes in those books, they're getting Divya Jnana. Real transcendental knowledge. So we're past the organized religion stage. Right now, this world is going through a whole new reset. Why? As I explained in my essay, the Rakshasas are in control. That's the reason. And all of this stuff is a rollout. And they make a great joy out of clashing regimes together. Srila Prabhupada explained that on page 41 in Rajavidya. Which was taken from a lecture that he gave, Bhagavatam. And as I explained in my essay, I brought a bigger look at the world picture today. I give the quote from the Bhagavatam, in which Srila Prabhupada says it. The Rakshasa are in control of society. It's a very dangerous, dangerous time. The people have no hope except the holy name. They're too rich, they're too wealthy, they're too well situated. But at the same time, Lord Chaitanya's movement must go on, and the atmosphere was too dirty, too sinful. There has to be a cleansing process, and it's going on. There has to be a payback for those billions of land and sea creatures killed every year for the human tongue, just for the tongue, the taste of blood. Meanwhile, the gorilla, the elephant, the hippopotamus, and the giraffe, they're vegetarians, and they're the strongest animals on the planet. So you don't need meat, fish, and eggs to be strong and healthy. What you need is prasadam. What you need is Balaram's mercy. Balaram means strength, spiritual strength. Nityananda Prabhu. That's what we have to give people, spiritual strength. And that's what they were doing in New Zealand, feeding them prasadam, feeding them the holy name, where they were chanting. One time they came in the morning to set up, and the people were already chanting Hare Krishna. And they said, oh, the real Hare Krishnas are here now, we can chant. That's ecstatic. In downtown Gainesville, 3 devotees were going up and down in the student section, chanting on, they were doing congregational chanting. There was a Hare Krishna, and the students say Hare Krishna, 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 Krishna. They're back and forth, responsive chanting, and they were all laughing, happy, dancing. Because Srila Prabhupada gave a lecture at the University of Florida. He set foot on that campus, and it's a tirtha. So we have to think in terms of the Krishna conscious science. There's a science, and it may be a little subtle, like I said, well, who can see those transcendental vibrations going around the planet? Who can see that? But you can know that. That's seeing. Like if I say, you see what I mean? It's saying, do you know what do you understand? So we understand the science. And we saw in New Zealand how it was working. Even when the gendarmes came, even when the police came, the police were cooperative. They said, we're very happy to see what we're happy that you've been here. And they helped the devotees move the equipment to the road before they burned the place down. And the leader of the group came over and thanked them. And they actually helped them move the stuff to the road, evacuated them before they burnt the place down. Now, there's a risk, right? The devotees took a risk, right? And they had to take another risk because the official GBC and local sannyasis all condemned what they were doing. They said, they're not part of our movement. We're not responsible for what they're doing. But guess what? They were responsible to Srila Prabhupada, not you.
Jai.
And that's where our responsibility lies, to Srila Prabhupada and no one else. And if we had a constitution, we would be able to show this, that you're giving nonsense advice, playing Russian roulette with these inoculations, not going out wherever there's a crowd, out of fear of being lumped in with the resistance. We are the resistance. It's a transcendental matter. It's a matter of life and death. And we can't pussyfoot around trying to please everybody. like Srila Prabhupada said, we want them to join us in our protest against these mudas. So you better cut me off soon because I don't know when to quit.
Garuda Prabhu said that he will have to depart in 5 minutes. I'm just wondering, Garuda, would you like to respond to anything that Rupanuga Prabhu has shared?
Well, I've been listening to Rupanuga Prabhu's discourses since 1973.
Wow!
So I'm just revisiting a voice that I've been listening to during most of my spiritual life. You know, it was Rupanuga Prabhu who authorized my going back to the university.
Nice.
So as conservative as Rupanuga Prabhu may sound sometimes, he was pretty daring, I think, back in the day when everyone considered the slaughterhouse like an untouchable thing. I mean, you just don't do that. Even Ravindra Swarup, who's finishing his doctorate, under whose administration I was functioning in Philadelphia, he said, I can't authorize this, you know. You're going to have to talk to Rupanuga Prabhu, the GBC. So I went and visited Rupanuga Prabhu because back then, remember, Prabhupada wanted a university in Mayapur. And Ravindra was to finish his doctorate to lead Bhagavat studies. And Ravindra said, why don't you finish your BA so you can be my first student? So I miraculously entered back into college after dropping out of Johns Hopkins to join the ashram several years earlier. And then of course, somehow I don't know anyone understands why, but either Jai Pataka or Prabhupada says, University of Calcutta has too many rules. We're not going to work with them. They canceled it. So there I am getting my undergraduate degree, and I'm wondering, why the hell am I doing this? Meanwhile, the CC is coming out, Chaitanya Charitamrita, coming out one volume at a time. And Sudas and I would sneak into the ashram quarters at night from 9 to 11, reading each volume as it was coming out. And here I am reading about how Mahaprabhu took sannyas to convince the intellectual class of persons. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this makes sense. It's the PhD that convinces. That's the danda of today. And that all made sense with, Rupanuga Prabhu's work with Swarup Damodar and putting together the BI, which was kind of revving up at the time. And so Ravindra couldn't believe that I got into the University of Chicago and Penn and Harvard. So I went to Rupanuga Prabhu and I said, is this crazy or should I do it? My parents are willing to pay for university study. We talked about it for a couple of hours and Rupanuga said, I think Prabhupada would be very pleased. And so off I went. So I blame Rupanuga Prabhu for my whole life of seva in the university. So if anyone has any objections to what I'm doing, you write to Rupanuga Prabhu. Do not write to me. Okay? I want to make that very clear. And you know what Rupanuga Prabhu said? He wrote to Prabhupada about me, and he said these words. He said, our idea is to establish the pure theism. This is how eloquent Rupanuga can wax, in letters, okay? He wrote this to Prabhupada. In fact, it was the last paragraph of the last letter Rupanuga ever wrote to Prabhupada. Out of the 100 letters he wrote. He said, our idea is to establish the pure theism of Lord Chaitanya at Harvard, vanquishing the Christian monopoly on theology. This is just a beautiful and powerful statement. So it was, it's to devotees like Rupanuga Prabhu, these early devotees who had, actually, I don't know how many of the early devotees had this kind of vision, but Rupanuga Prabhu certainly did. And, it's no accident that I came in touch with Rupanuga Prabhu back in the early days, and no accident that the whole BI happened under his auspices. And so, so I'm just explaining this in case any of you have any criticisms. You write to Rupanuga Prabhu and not to me. Okay.
Thank you very much, Guru Prabhu.
Isn't that an extraordinary statement that Rupanuga Prabhu wrote? I mean, I practically live by that statement. To vanquish the Christian. As I've been listening to this, I'm actually making a proposal to the American Academy of Religion for a panel on how Vedic religions can address world theology. I'm actually making a proposal for this. So I'm still doing what Rupanuga Prabhu said back in 1977 to Prabhupada, as Prabhupada was reading my master's thesis on the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I have a debt to Rupanuga Prabhu. So I'm just declaring that and confessing it right here. That's all. That's all I have to say. And I don't really care what Rupanuga Prabhu has to say after that. He's already said everything to me back in the day. So
Are you proud of Garuda Prabhu, Rupanuga Prabhu?
I think proud is the wrong word, but
blame is the word. I take the blame.
Yeah, blame. That's right. Yeah. He takes the blame. That's the.
No, I've always understood. I've always understood this, that people respond to authority when it's backed up with degrees, especially PhD. As Shubhava called the plow department. But in Garuda's case, to go into the, as he called it, the slaughterhouse was, from my point of view, a very brave act. Because some devotees have done that, have come out more affected by what they did. Rather than affect the academicians, they got affected by the academicians.
Right.
And Garuda has not, he has not subjected himself to that authority. And his offering his association, Srila Prabhupada wants us to go into every field and purify it by our association, by our being.
Yeah.
So Garuda's had the right purpose from the beginning. And how he's managed to survive that association, I have no idea.
You know what Rupanuga Prabhu did? I got into a doctoral program at the University of Chicago. This is where the famous Edward Dimmock was teaching, who wrote the foreword to Prabhupada's original Gita. And I was there, and I'm just halfway through the year, and Rupanuga Prabhu calls me up and says, Garuda, look, I don't know that anyone else is ever going to do this, but you got to go to Harvard. I said, Rupanuga Prabhu, I just arrived here. I just got here, you know. He said, look, I don't think anyone's ever going to do this, so you got to go to Harvard. So I ended up after I went to Harvard the next year, and then after that to the Smithsonian project over the Matsya project that came back, and returned to Harvard and got my doctorate from there. But, you know, Rupanuga's been guiding me the whole time back in the day. And Satsvarupa was also very supportive. When Prabhupada came to the New York temple for Rath Yatra in 76, I think it was, I was there, and Satsvarupa and I were talking, and he said, Garuda, promise me that if you ever go astray from Prabhupada's lotus feet, you will quit the academics immediately, because too many people, like Rupanuga Prabhu just said, too many people have gone astray. I said, I promise. Now, Rupanuga never put it to me quite that way, never made me, confront me, promise. But you know what? It was already implicit in everything he was saying to me and guiding me. So anyway, it's amazing. There are many that have gone back since myself, but neither Rupanuga Prabhu or myself could have predicted that. And some are doing it well in very devotionally and powerful ways, and some, are doing it more practically. It's a way to make a living and so on. Anyway, we're all in different stages of things, but my training from Rupanuga Prabhu was dogged. It's dogged. You do not let up, and you make sure that Mahaprabhu Gauranga's theology is established in the academic world, the intellectual world.
Yes, you changed them, not they changed you.
That's right. I gathered tools from them. There was a Nam Rasa interview with me and Basu Ghosh from India, and he was, of course, Basu Ghosh privately was very proud of a couple of his sons going to some major schools for graduate studies and all that. He was telling me. I said, that's wonderful, fine, engineering, whatever. And then on the Nam Rasa interview, he said, look, I'm going back. We're winding up the interview. He said, I'm going back and I'm managing temples in India, and so on. I don't know what Garuda's doing. Well, he'll probably be going back to the slaughterhouse. I said, wait a second. Don't just characterize what I'm doing as getting absorbed by the slaughterhouse. I'm slaughtering them and their misconceptions. That's what Krishna allows me to do. And I mentioned how, there are great strides being taken here in getting books published by major publishers, big academic publishers, on the true nature of Krishna Bhakti, instead of the academic view of it, which can sometimes be very peculiar, sometimes very good, but it's very mixed. So we should be the spokespersons of what Krishna Bhakti is, rather than outsiders. So this is our task, and Rupanuga Prabhu's great energy, his great preaching energy, is contagious. So I carry that into my arena, and not as much as he has, but a little bit. But a little bit goes a long way. Rupanuga Prabhu's got a lot of energy. So I just take a little bit from him, and I've been riding that wave for some time now. So for that, I am indebted, Rupanuga Prabhu, eternally indebted.
Rupanuga Prabhu, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Garuda Prabhu organized, I believe it was 25 scholars you brought together. Is that correct?
For which conference? At Harvard?
Posthumous edited authors' books.
Oh, that's 14 scholars. Yeah. Yep. Rupanuga Prabhu is aware of all that. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And actually...
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
Go on.
That came about because when I was interacting with Jayadwaita quite a bit about his editing about 3-4 years ago, even though we were good friends and I wrote the foreword to his book, I even taught him how to write a book. He came to me, he said, I've never written a book. How do I do it? I taught him how to write a book. I was his mentor. I wrote the foreword to his book. He acknowledges me in his book. But despite all that, when it came to Prabhupada's books and preserving Prabhupada's books, he said he no longer trusted me as a scholar. I said, well, if you don't trust me, then I'll put 14 scholars together and maybe you'll trust them. And that's what I've done. He didn't believe me at the time, but I raised $25,000 and we had a beautiful conference at Graduate Theological Union. It was a fantastic conference, all appreciating Prabhupada's Vani, all respecting scholars within the tradition and then scholars of the tradition on the outside. Both were saying, how can anyone conceive of a disciple changing the words of the master? It just was that simple. It's just that simple. So I came up with a process to be able to respect, a curator in a famous museum with a famous painting from centuries ago A curator will at most do the slightest little touch up, maybe, if there's like a chip in the painting or something, but will never repaint anything. But what they might do is they might put an even more elaborate, more supportive, more beautiful frame around the painting. So there's a way to do that textually that respects and glorifies the painting. So that's what I've been working on. Yeah, Rupanuga was my inspiration in that as well, starting 4 years ago, and put me together with Gupta Das, and we're now doing we've done a third interview discussion, and that's going up later today on Bird's Eye View with Garuda. It's meant to be funny, but it's also meant to be telling. You know, we need to get above, the whole issue. Look at the whole, at the issue as a whole, bird's eye view. So Rupanuga Prabhu has been a guide in this issue as well for me. So once a teacher, always a teacher.
Will the results of all those scholars coming together be printed? Will it be coming out?
I just found a publisher for it. They're extremely excited about it. Lexington Books, an imprint of Roman and Littlefield, will be publishing the book. So good stuff happening. Anyway, I do have to run, unfortunately, but I just wanted to harass Rupanuga Prabhu a little bit. I hope I was successful, and those harassments I offer at your lotus feet, Rupanuga Prabhu, and the lotus feet of everyone here. So glad to be with all of you, and I apologize. I have to go in and under some pressured deadlines here, so we'll have to comply. But thank you for inviting me, Gauraji.
With pleasure. Thank you.
Right.
Garuda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
So Rupanuga Prabhu, usually Pradyumna Prabhu and I, we're keeping these to roughly 2 hours. So we've been 2 hours and a little over 2.5. Not that we would ever want to stop hearing from you, but you were suggesting yourself, I think a little earlier, that maybe we can call it a day and we can continue in our series with you. Is that acceptable to you?
Yes, I was explaining before that 6 hours.
Yeah.
Was it 8? It was 6 hours. I forget how many hours. No one's going to sit through that much time. And things have to come in segments.
Right.
And now even 2 hours is a lot. So whatever you can do is fine with me. I was prepared to deal with a lot of other things that you all had mentioned yourselves, and we didn't really get too far. But the main thing we discussed was about Srila Prabhupada's books, and that's always the most important issue. And so we covered that, I think, pretty well. Mm-hmm. And there are other issues that are really tied in with Srila Prabhupada Bani, but at least I think that we've covered that.
I was trying to maybe go deeper into fewer subjects so we can not necessarily have to revisit, we can explain different topics at different times. So I think we
don't have to come back. We don't have to come back to the same thing over and over again.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't like doing that either. So I've had to repeat today already a few things that just keep they had to be in context. You can't leave things out of context.
You just touched on the Bhaktivedanta Institute today, but I was looking forward to actually hearing the history of that, which maybe we could save for the next session or a future session.
We can do that for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to talk more about that book. I felt that book is like, doing what they should be doing. And he's not even a scientist, Punja Pragna. But I would like to see that book, which is on Amazon. I would like to see that book available for every devotee. I mean, it's like ammunition, It's logic and reasoning to its ultimate degree, and it really defeats this whole idea of life from chemicals. And it's just the beginning, as far as I'm concerned. But it's the first book, in my opinion, that's come out that's really addressed the issue. straightforwardly in a way that the man in the street can comprehend it.
If you have any such links, Prabhu, that you want to share, you can send them to me by email, and I'll add them in the video descriptions when I publish these up, so devotees can have the links and we can all go.
Yeah,
check it out.
I think the book is available on Amazon right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so perfect.
So any devotee can get the book. It's only 100 pages. It's only 100 pages, and it's a fast read. But the information there saves so much trouble of looking for ourselves, and it gives a logic and reasoning to Srila Prabhupada's statements about this is our greatest grief. This is the greatest. This is the greatest disservice to mankind. I mean, these things are very important statements Srila Prabhupada made, and I think they have to be addressed.
He sent me a PDF of it, and I've been negligent in getting back to him. So thank you for reminding me about it. Yeah.
Yeah. My opinion is that too much looking at the screen is not good for the eyeballs.
No.
And I like books because you can refer to them anytime. You're right there, and there's no question of losing the information. It's all there. So I would recommend that whatever it costs, this book should be purchased and kept and read in the comfort of one's home, and without worrying about their eyesight. I mean, my eyes have been bothering me with these long sessions anyway, and I can see it's hard to study a book on the screen. I don't know how people do it.
Yeah.
It really is. I mean, how can you study a book? I mean, when I read a book, I have a pencil with me, and I can make marks in the margin. I can make a comment. I can, turn the corner of the dog ear a little bit, or to put it aside. I don't care if it's electricity or not. As long as there's daylight.
Sure. We want to take good care of you, so we'll look forward to the next session with you, but we want you to pace things. So whenever in a few days or however long you would like to do another session in our series with you, we'll be very happy to do that.
It's up to you.
Thank you, Prabhus, everybody, for coming, and Rupanuga Prabhu for sharing with us. Sharing is caring. Jai.
That's a great compliment.
Please accept my respectful obeisances, everyone. Vanchiko Pariviccha Kripasinduvyedvicha Namo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Rupanuga Prabhu ki jai, Nitagore Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.